So real quick, how many folks are through exercise 10? Awesome, you've been working during cookie time. That's laudable, if perhaps not advisable. Okay, cool. So the next thing we're gonna go on to do in exercise 11 is, now we're actually going to, in some sense, make Hello World programmable. We're going to configure it to behave differently depending on who comes in as input. And the way we're gonna do that is, we're going to write to the configuration store in the same kind of a registry model that we're using, an entry to configure when a particular person comes in that we want to give them a particular greeting and response. So the first thing you have to do this is you have to make sure that the initialize data tree method that you already have from last step, that you actually add one to also initialize the configuration data store registry, your greeting registry. So you need a line that looks like this to be added to initialize data tree and hello world impl. And then once you've done that, you want to have hello world impl consult the configuration greeting registry when responding. So you want to create a method that looks like this, that reads from the greeting registry based upon the input, that will go through basically and say, okay, well, we'll start with the stock greeting just in case, and then we'll do a read-only transaction, and we will go looking in the configuration data store for something that has an instance identifier for this input. And if we get it, we'll start by assuming we don't get it, but we'll try and get that from the future. We'll get the optional from the future. If something goes terribly wrong, we'll just log it. If it doesn't go terribly wrong and that entry is present, then we will use whatever the greeting is for that entry. So effectively, if I were to write to the configuration store something that says, if Ed Warnicke comes in, say, hi, Ed Warnicke, as the greeting, then this would go through, it would assume to begin with that we're just gonna say hello, Ed Warnicke. But if it finds an entry in the configurational side for the name it has, Ed Warnicke, then it will use that greeting instead. Does that make sense to folks? Okay. And once you've got this method cool. Once you've got this method in place, you want to invoke that method in your hello world rather than the hard-coded response. So right now you've got a hard-coded greeting. You would want to invoke this method to provide the greeting in your hello world RPC. Yes?
So how come you didn't have to extend the
Because we're actually using the same model on both sides. On the operational side, we're basically saying, if I've got an entry for this person, it's telling me operationally I've given them this greeting. On the configurational side, we're saying if I have an entry for this person, I'm being told to use this greeting when they ask. I'm sorry, what? So no, it's available on both sides. So it's available on both sides. And so, you know, that's step 11. And you should be able to do that. I'm actually gonna let you guys go ahead and also try and do step 12. I think you've done enough to date with having to go check. Well, try and do step 12 and see if you can figure out how to actually put in RESTconf stuff in the config side. And then if not, we'll walk through it. But let's start with step 11 and see if we can get step 11 going. Exercise 11, okay? Yep. Sure. Yep, should be fine. Right, so those are mostly about imports. So if you, so there's actually a quick way to try and resolve all of them, which is if you right click on the editor, no, just anywhere in the editor, which is here, yeah. Just right click, choose source. It's about halfway. And then organize imports, which is also Shift Control O, just for future reference. It will go through, it will, when it can figure it out, it'll use that. Now we are using the Google Common Base optional, not the Java util optional. Okay. You want to use the Yang binding version of instance identifier, not the one from protobuf. The MD-sal binding, data broker. Yep, and that's the last one you have to choose, so just choose finish. Now, in a pinch, you could actually go hunting around. All of these are things that have been imported in one of the other files.
That's what was taking me so damn long to finish the.
No, it's fine. After a while, you just get to where you can eyeball it, you know which one you're dealing with.
Like I said,
But that's why on the previous ones, no, that's fine. And on the previous ones, that's why we give you a list of imports so you could figure it out a little more readily.
so why would you do that's fine.
Yep, and so you just need to do that at the end of your test. You need to validate your grading registry.
Oh, it's never even loaded. All right, so here
Yep, at the end of test RPC.
and it would look like validate registry. And here's what I found odd. And maybe it was because I had a network problem before.
Mhm.
I go in here and I'll put it after this.
Sure.
And I start typing this in. I thought there was some sort of autocomplete in IDE.
Yeah, there is triggering it sometimes. The heuristics for triggering it are interesting. So like hit control space. Usually control space does it.
Oh,
There we go, yeah. And then you just want to pass it the same name you passed to the RPC. Yep, name. There we go. Cool. Oh, no, it's all good. It's all good. That's why we're here. How can I help you?
In this says routine there, it says because the way we implemented the hello world RPC, etc. But I take it as in here, and when you program, well, the only thing that we test in integration tests that involves the data store is when you program the response.
Not quite.
and
Not quite.
Not quite.
Not quite. So go back to rework reading with the exchange listeners. So basically, think of it this way. You call your RPC. Your RPC writes a transaction to write to the operational store.
And then it fires it off and then returns before it's finished.
And so you could very well go looking for it in your test before it's actually written to the data store. So there's a potential race condition there.
Yeah.
And so in order to avoid that race condition, we can use data change listeners.
Yeah, but I couldn't figure out where where the race occurred actually, and the way given how the tests are set up, because
Well,
you programmed the response here. And
Right,
that's the
right,
one that we're going to look at.
but the configurational side is not where the race condition potentially is.
Ah, right.
It's
okay.
operational,
That's not-
right? It's that your RPC itself is writing, is doing the transaction to write.
Yeah.
It's getting back a future, so we don't know, we're not waiting to make sure it's done,
Yeah.
which is a design decision, right? And so we could have a situation, and in fact, actually, I hit this as part of doing this tutorial at one point. But it's a race condition, you don't always hit it. But the more complicated shit you do, the more likely you are to hit it. Where that write hadn't completed before I went to do the read to validate it.
Yeah, and then it fails, but you can't reproduce the failure
Because
it's not- that's a race
it's a race
condition.
condition.
It was more because of this. I was wondering because in
Yep.
this variant, you're sure that it's finished.
Oh yeah. Because you're
before it's,
absolutely,
before it
because
returns.
you're writing, you're actually, and you're doing that intentionally because it's a test
Yeah.
method, so you don't care about performance that much.
Async until you get here, and then it becomes synchronous.
Yeah, which is not a big deal because that's a test
You
method.
actually want it that way because you want to be sure.
You want to be damn sure it's there, yeah.
Response is-
Yeah.
it's there before you go.
All of life is trade-offs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's basically, so that's the race conditions on the operational side. Not the, you were absolutely correct going, I don't see this race condition he's talking about on the config side
Yeah.
because it's not there the way we're using it currently. But yeah, I'm kind of a bastard. I will put race conditions in my examples when it serves my purposes. But I mean, the thing is,
Yeah, well, it's an important lesson to learn.
well, it's not only an important lesson to learn, but if you look at what it takes to do the data change listeners, it was important to get something that worked, even if it had a potential for a race condition, to get past that point. Then we can come back and do it better. So,
Yeah, shows the point of the data change listeners. Well,
a point. I mean, it's just one useful way you can use them.
yeah.
So, yeah.
How long did it take you to set up all the tutorials?
fair bit.
And then copy all the USB keys as well.
Well, the USB keys, the LF Foundation staff did.
Right.
So I got them the zip file with the stuff in it, and God bless him, Casey spent 10 hours using a duplicating machine to copy the USB keys. So.
Might be a good idea for you to window manager because
Okay.
some of these, the Unity
Mhm.
managers,
Yeah, I could see that.
slabs of dog.
I know. I'm really not a fan of VMs for development. It's just the thought had been, and given the circus trying to get going this morning, maybe I was wrong about this. The thought had been that it would be easier and simpler than trying to, than trying to make sure everyone had the right JVM and the right Maven and the right Eclipse. I could be easily convinced either way, but.
The other option is you have to really stress to people beforehand, like, hey, this is your homework coming into
That sounds like an option, but it's not really. 70% won't do it.
That never works.
Yeah, it never actually happens.
No.
I mean, I had 3 or 4 people ask me what should I do in preparation before I get here, and I was really, I mean, I was touched that they wanted to prepare, but I don't usually do prereqs for tutorials just because I don't actually expect anyone will do them,
Yeah.
and I don't like arguing with reality. I always lose. So.
Yeah, especially with ODL, since you need specific Maven settings.
Yeah, yeah. You use specific settings.xml and.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would have spent half the morning just setting up Windows on Windows.
And we only spent a quarter of it, so.
Yeah, and since using a VM means that anybody can come along and do it in the VM instead of replacing their own build environment with the.
Yeah, and
ODL
once the VM is running, you've got reasonable confidence that you've got what you know.
Yeah.
You know what you've got.
When the comments between VM and gets messed up, you can cut and paste between
Yeah, I know.
completely
Cut and paste is not working for you?
unworkable.
But at least you can run a browser inside the VM and just copy and paste within the VM. Then.
No, you shouldn't because there's
Alright.
no network to the VM.
So the network to the VM, like that was in.
There was an easy fix for that, I did think. What we could have done is we could have the files for the wiki local to the machine.
Also possible.
That would have been really good.
Yep, yep.
Relatively lightweight.
Yep.
Thing that would have made it quite a bit easier because then you wouldn't have to worry about whether or not that worked.
Agreed.
That would
Agreed.
be so just a small
Yep.
enhancement for next time. That would be really good.
Yeah, yeah. It had also been mentioned to me that there should be some they should have been done locally in Markdown. So.
I know it's really hard to cope with all the different permutations of things that could go wrong. But
Oh, see, I find it very easy. I just don't. I just presume that everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and that doesn't bother me. I find it kind of humorous.
Yeah, we cannot foresee, cannot foresee everything in a tutorial because with that tutorial it's much simpler than this and things go wrong and at this level.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable how smoothly this has actually gone.
There is one thing which you probably you cannot change it, but is that the compilation of with the VM for me at least takes long, and so the turnaround time is so long.
I understand. Yeah,
at this stage where you make a lot of mistakes, it's like it takes 10 minutes and then you realize. Oh my
Well,
God,
that's why you'd see me like going into I go into a particular subdirectory instead of building the whole thing, because the things that actually take a long time are the integration tests and the tests that run for features. Because we have this thing called single feature test that checks to make sure all the OSGI wiring is working correctly, and that is absolutely critical because we've got like 40 some projects in Lithium, and like there are projects that can screw up their wiring and bork the entire universe, and that's not cool. So we try and avoid that.
question
Yep.
regarding the task.
Mhm.
Could you please clarify? Should we store actual data in the operational tree, but read previously saved values from configuration?
Yeah, you want to read the preview. You want to read from configuration and write to operational in this case.
Yep.
Yep.
Read-
Yep. You so,
Understood.
and then you as a human write to configurational from the Yang UI. Because you're a human, you're allowed to configure things.
Understood.
Yep. Cool. Cool. Yes. Okay, let's take a look.
I'll go in and make it do this.
I get vaguer as we go along, you've probably noticed.
Okay.
That's the point.
So basically, you're saying invoke the method rather than hard coding the response.
Right. So go look at your invocation. So you see that place where it says hello plus input get name? That's the hard coding.
Okay.
And that's what you want to replace with the invocation of the method.
Okay. So the whole thing then.
Yep. You want to replace with an invocation to that method. Yep.
Semicolon is 9 can go away.
Yep. Doing what?
Why is that shaded?
Because you've highlighted it.
I didn't mean to. Oh, I guess I did. How about that?
It's trying to be helpful early.
I know. Again, I've only minor experience with the IDE.
That's fine. You've done a lot of good work today. So
All
don't
right.
forget to save it.
So yeah, we should be able to save. And let's see, was there anything else we had to do at this point? No, go try it out.
You build it,
Yep.
build it, and try it.
Do I have to build all the way starting at the top?
You can build
Although-
impling, just build impl in Carafe.
Huh?
Just build impl in Carafe and you're fine.
Impl and craft.
Yeah, because you just changed impl, and then for your changes to make it into the distribution, you need to recompile Carafe.
So I need to get up.
Yep. Yep. Here, Raghu will help you. Okay, so how are folks doing on exercise 11? What? Yes, you're right, you do. You're absolutely right. So how are folks doing on exercise 11? How are we doing? Cool. So raise your hand if you think you've got exercise 11 together. Cool. How many of you have actually tried to figure out exercise 12 to do the manual testing? And have you succeeded? Awesome. Cool. So I'll go ahead and start doing exercise 11 up here so I can sort of walk everybody else through exercise 12. And then we can move on to integration testing for this.
Remind me to ask you an unrelated question at the end of all.
Of course. Okay. So we've gotten up, we're initialized. So I'm going to go ahead and reload the Yang UI so we can show manual testing. So go ahead and go to the hello operations. Well, go to config and greeting registry. And we'll go ahead and create a greeting registry entry on the config side. Which we do with a put. Okay. So we want to add a list item. We'll just use John Smith. And it'll be hi, John, as the greeting. So I've filled in the name of the greeting. You select, we're creating a particular registry entry. So that's why we've chosen registry entry instead of the whole grouping of greeting registry entry. Yep. And I clicked on greeting registry entry, add a list item. So John Smith, hi, John, as the greeting. And then the operation is put. I click send. Is what? I put that in there, yes. Yes, I put John Smith in the top field because I'm actually programming this. Yep, well, the thing is, when I put it here, it puts it up there. It's nice like that. And then what I will do is, just to show the operations, I will come to hello world, and I will say John Smith. I will send that, and I get back, hi, John. And then that's how you manually test that. As expected, I can look at operational. I can get the list of operational entries, and I can see that because I've now actually invoked the operation, it's there. And that's the manual testing bit there. So how are folks doing? How many folks have got 12 working? Exercise 12? Should we wait a few minutes then before moving on to 13? Give folks a chance to catch up? Okay. So I'll talk a little bit to exercise 13 so folks can start if they're there. So exercise 13 is just the integration test for the custom greeting. And for that, we actually need a new test because we're actually going to be testing the programmable RPC. It's basically identical to the test RPC, except that it stops to program an alternate response. And it checks for the response it programmed. So what you kind of want to do is extract out of the initial test RPC the common set of logic into a method like this, which is validate RPC response, where you're doing most of the stuff that you were doing to begin with, but you want to use it both in test RPC and in test programmable RPC. And then you want to write a method to program a response to the greeting, which basically goes through, gets the data broker, does a write transaction, and writes to the configurational store. So that's how you program in test programmable RPC the response that you want to see. And then you write a test programmable RPC method, which looks pretty familiar. You pick a name, a different name. You pick some string response that you want. You program that response. You validate that you've got that response from the RPC, and you validate that you've got the greeting registry that you expected. Does that make sense to folks? So that's 13. So let me know if you guys need any help. Yep. Of course. Right. So Yang UI. I come up to config, expand on greeting registry, and I want to create a particular greeting registry entry. So for that, I need a put. And I come down here and I click add list item, which is the plus sign. And I'll use Tim. Hi, Tim. So click send. Goes ahead and sends that. Then if I come to operations, and I use name Tim and send that, it says by Tim. Yep. I'll wander back. Mm-hmm.
Expected, but we got this.
That is fascinating.
So I disabled that one for now, as it didn't build because we are failing in here. All right.
Okay, so show me your RPC,
RPC.
the Hello World RPC.
Hello World RPC. That's in test RPC.
Okay.
Here. That's the Hello World.
Okay. Where are you constructing the greeting? Oh, read greeting from registry. Okay, so you're to the point of reading the greeting from the registry.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, let's take a look at your read greeting from registry.
Oh, is that double? No.
Ah.
No,
Yeah, you're adding input.getName to it, so you're doubling up.
Oh, true.
So I think if you take that out, you'll probably be good.
Set.
No worries. 90% of all of my bugs are stupid.
It's always between keyboard and chain.
Yeah, totally. No, you should be good. Well, that's dependent in the sense, so normally if you just build from top level, Maven will figure out the dependencies. But if you changed Impl, you want to build Impl, and then when you build Carafe, it'll incorporate the built changes for Impl. That's why there's an order there. Mm-hmm. Huh. Interesting.
Everything else works. I can put it in there. I can go back and I can do a get on it, and it'll show me the
Yep.
names and the responses.
Well, let me wander over, we'll take a look.
One question before you wander off. Is there a way to kind of do all the Maven build or Maven clean install, fire it up in Eclipse? So I just.
There is, but I don't usually use it. So I don't know quite whether it works or doesn't work or how well it works. There is a way. You can just right click on.
Well, I'm fine with the console. It's just switch forth and back.
Yeah. I just don't know. Like, I know it's grumpy about some of the plugins. I don't know if that results, like, I think, for example, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a way to do it. I just don't know whether or not it will have other issues.
To import, I mean, it's for somebody, since I don't have my laptop.
I'm sorry.
Existing, like if you import the Eclipse, the Maven project, under file import, you should find a import Maven based project. Or
Yeah, existing Maven project.
Yeah, there is no entry saying existing Maven project. That means the plugin is not there.
The plugin has been missing. Yeah.
I
That's
think because
bizarre,
it's
yeah.
on his laptop.
Yeah, that's probably
I think
missing.
the plugin is missing. Which plugin is it? Like existing Maven plugin?
Yeah, hang on, let me turn around while I'm here. It's an excuse not to stay.
This is the manual.
Uh-huh.
I think I got it right. I just don't know if I'm testing it properly.
Cool, so
what do I need to do?
go to config.
Yeah.
And drill down under config to, so you need to go under config.
Yeah, right. Sorry.
And greeting, yep. And you need to create a particular entry.
Okay, so that's here, right?
Yep, and then change the method from get to put.
Oh, that's what I forgot to do. Okay, so create an entry here.
Yep. I don't know why it doesn't change automatically. It should, but. me go back to the operation. Yep. Yeah. Yep, send. Yep. Victory.
I knew I was doing it. I knew I did it.
It's always the small things, man.
You know, it's those tidbits you remember best, right?
Well, this is why we do things instead of just talking about them,
Exactly.
right? Because
Yeah, I know.
I mean, this is about a 45-minute presentation if I wanted to talk you through it,
Sure.
but you wouldn't be able to sit down and do much with it.
Right, that's right. Yeah, okay.
So cool. Okay, let's have a look.
Data tree.
Hey.
Ed, have a question.
Sure, what's up?
Can I show you the code?
Sure. Well, have you found, is there
No,
some, okay,
no.
cool.
So this is where I put that. Maybe this is the wrong location.
Oh, here's what's happening. So put logical configuration, you're doing that after you submitted the transaction. You need to do it before you submit the transaction. So the second put, when you're creating,
This one? Yeah.
the first one is operational, that's in the right place. But the second put
It has to go after this?
has to go directly after, no. So right now you do the put to the operational data store, then you submit the transaction. Then you do another put against the transaction that's already been submitted. And that doesn't work.
Okay.
You have to do both puts up here and then submit the transaction. Does that make sense?
So this needs to move up.
Yep, so just below the first one. And then it should work. Yep, and that should work. Cool. Yep. How's it going? Check to make sure that your key matches the name, the key, the string you're using for your key in the instance identifier. Check to make sure that it matches the name that you're setting on the data object. Right, so you're creating an instance identifier, right? And for that, you use a string for the key. And then you're also creating a data object where you're using a string for the key. I actually got an error almost exactly like that a couple days ago, and I was actually sticking the greeting in the key instead of the name in the key. So that's why I say look for something like that.
Because all I did was copy that word from the key and paste it in here.
Let's see. Yeah, but let's go look at your original impl. Look at your hello world in impl.
No, it's up here, right?
Probably. That's where I would put it.
This one, no.
What you want is hello world impl. Do you have a hello world impl? It has to be here somewhere.
It should have been generated.
Let's go look at your provider. It would be an impl right next to your hello provider.
I'm seeing this pretty
Right, so impl. Yep, and then go down. Let's take a look at your hello world provider, or your hello provider real quick. Okay, so this hasn't been changed since step 1.
Right. Yeah, okay.
So you need to go do
Change.
step 2 and do a hello world impl. So you got something catching on that end.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's what's going on. It's not, logic is not in here.
Yeah, the logic is not in there. All right. You're welcome. Okay. So how are folks doing on step 13, the integration test? Has anyone got that done yet, or? Okay. So we'll wait a little while, give people an opportunity to catch up. No, no. Yeah, every time you build, you're wiped out your local data store. Uh, 5:40, I thought. Let me see what I can find out. That would be a good thing. Yeah. Let me see. You're right. I do have something else at 5:30. This runs until. But this says 5:40. Wow, that's interesting. I am on that. Yeah, 5:30. Where is it? Cypress Room. I gotta get there a little early, so I may just hand it off to you to look after. You can do data change listeners, right? You can do the data change listeners, right? I have data change listeners and then the completely async example. So.
Use the -d skip tests
Mhm.
with Maven script. It doesn't actually install any of the artifacts. It says skipping artifacts. So I was trying to skip the tests to speed up the
Interesting.
build process. Yeah.
You shouldn't skip
When
the.
I went to my Carath directory, the cupboard was bare. There was nothing in it because.
Interesting.
And then I went back to the build, and it does say skipping artifacts installation. So
Well, so the thing is, there are some things that will skip artifact installation because they've been configured to,
yeah, but what I'm saying is it looks like skipping -d skip tests.
which you shouldn't do. I agree.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So I think
I'll take a look.
respectfully, there might be a bug in the
Dude, I produce more bugs than any other 5 menu now.
sure it wasn't here.
Raghu could attest to this.
Yeah, but anyhow, just want to know.
Yep, appreciate it.
Just trying to speed it up, but it just falls sick on me.
We still have to do the validate RPC response
Mm-hmm.
on 13 before we.
Yep, because you got it. Well, what you're doing is extracting that method out. So you've got that logic already in your test RPC, but you're sucking it out into a separate method so it only lives in one place instead of living just duplicate in two. In its own method. So right now, if you read that logic is almost all exactly what you've got in your test RPC, but you need to use it two places, right? So you want to pull it into its own method. There's a validate greeting registry. On my way. Yep. 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 Hey. What can I do for you?
I was able to program the response back. But
Awesome.
now, on the test though, how do I call that? Because when I was configuring it, I couldn't find anywhere to break on that to see what was going on underneath the covers. Now, is that happening in RESTconf? When you're actually
Oh, when you're putting that in, you're putting it, when you've been doing it for the annual testing, you're putting it in via RESTconf, yes.
okay? Now, how do I actually?
So I think,
How do I set that?
so there's a write a method, so if you look at the instructions, the wiki page, okay, so write a method to program response to a greeting. So program response is the method you'd write, and you'd stick that into the test programmable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was.
Yep. No worries, it's all good. Hey.
I encountered this race condition because it says.
That's exactly where I encountered it. So yes, you're encountering that race condition.
Okay.
You're just unlucky. So yeah, you may have to just go ahead and do the data change listeners for 14, because it does happen. Do you understand why the race condition occurs?
Because it is asynchronous, so sometimes we may write before it is read.
Right. So
Sometimes
your
we
RPC says, I want you to write.
Yes.
It gets a future. It's not necessarily written yet.
Yeah.
It returns. We go to read it, but the write may not have actually completed.
Yes.
So yeah. So yeah, we need to do something smarter. No worries. Through what? Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Robot does something quite a bit different. So yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, it's lovely. Yeah, there's a lot of magic that makes it easy. So much magic. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep, yep. No worries. It's all good. I'm glad. That's the point. It's not so hard when someone takes the time to explain it, but trying to piece it all together from hints and clues is very hard.
Yeah, and I had when I inherited
Mm-hmm.
the stuff, nobody was around to help me. It was just thrown into my lap.
Congratulations, there's code.
Yeah, exactly. Have fun with it.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, it's been fun to understand.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Are you going to be doing anything with the OPMP?
I believe they have me on a panel of some sort.
Okay.
I've been informed that I will be on a panel Thursday morning.
Yeah, because I've seen that after lithium got out, I wanted, there's a lot of stuff I wanted to do with SDN.
Mm-hmm.
Keep improving upon it, but they're like, there's only 2 lithium and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
I'm hoping it doesn't degrade.
I'm hoping so. I mean, yeah. Come here, we have code.
Yeah, and part of the reason is that it was the network technologies team, and I'm on the business technologies team, so it makes more sense to be the OPMP space.
I can see that.
And but our MT team has to get up to speed on this.
Well, hopefully this will help. So.
Yeah, I'm not planning on going way too far away from it, but
Good.
a lot of that people up higher up in the food chain.
Make those calls.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Yep.
Because I have a Trello board full of a list of stuff that
Oh,
I
I'm
want to
sure.
put in there.
I'm sure.
Maybe 2 AM ones.
Yeah. So how are folks doing on 12? Guys, how are you doing on 12? Could I see a show of hands for people who have got 12 working? Oh my, that's gone up quickly. All right, I will hobble to the front and we will talk about 13. Okay, guys, so, oh, I'm sorry, I was talking about 12. How many people have got 13, the integration test working? That's a goodly number of you too. All right, cool. So, 14 data change listeners. There are slides. Let me go ahead and walk through those really quickly. So, we talked about the data store. So data change listeners, finding out about change in the data tree. So what you end up doing is you can register with a data broker, a data change listener. So again, you pick the logical data store you want to listen to, you have an instance identifier, you have a data change listener, and you have a data change scope. This is very similar to what you see for LDAP, where you can have how far down the tree you want to actually get. You want to go looking for changes. So when you do that, it creates a data change listener for you. So you've got that. A transaction comes in and is applied to the data tree. When that transaction starts coming in, an asynchronous data change event is created. The first thing that happens is the original version of that subtree is copied in as the original in the data change event. When the transaction is applied, we also copy in what was created and what was deleted and what was updated. Then that data change event gets handed off to all the data change listeners that are listening for data changes that are off that subtree. And so that's basically the picture behind data change listeners. Do folks have questions about that real quick before we move forward? Yes? Data change listeners have been around since Hydrogen. The API has changed and improved. So there was an improved API in Helium. And so it's not brand new to Lithium by any stretch. Other questions? Okay. So exercise 14, reworking the greeting registry integration test with data change listeners. So we've already seen one case of you guys reporting this. So at this point, if you're unlucky, you'll discover that there's a race condition in our integration tests. So if you recall, when we have the Hello World RPC, we call it, it creates a transaction to write to the operational store. It submits the transaction, it gets a future. Now that means that it hasn't been told for sure that that write has gone in, but it returns anyway, which was a design decision that we made. When that comes back to our test RPC, it then looks in the operational data store and says, I'm gonna go do a read and see if I can find what I expect there. But if that write hasn't completed yet, that read is not gonna find what it's expecting. And I know some of you on the last, on 13, started seeing that race condition happen. Whether you see it or not will vary depending on, you know, the complexity of what's going on and everything else. It's the joy of race conditions. And so one of the ways we can deal with this is to use data change listeners so that basically we listen for that change coming in from the write. And you proceed that way. And in fact, what I ended up doing was sort of a hybrid between a data change listener and a future. Effectively, what you end up doing is you create this extremely longly named greeting registry data change listener future. It extends an abstract future for greeting registry entries. It implements data change listener, and auto-closable is just for cleaning up after itself. It goes through, it's got the string it was created for, something to hold the registration. And so what effectively you would do is you would create one of these when you are going to call the RPC and you want to test to see if what you think should happen. You give it the data broker and the string. It goes ahead and it creates the instance identifier, basically saying I want to listen for greeting registry entries. And it registers itself looking at data scope base, which just basically means I'm looking for the thing I'm looking for. Not necessarily if things are changing way downstream of it. Then for on data change, which is what gets called when something actually changes, you create the instance identifier you were looking for, and you go looking to see if you actually have it in either created or updated events. If you do, you do an instance of check for the type of the thing, which is just basic hygiene because you're going to cast it. And you set the future to have this value. So effectively, you've got a future that's listening for the change. When the change comes through, it gets set, and it acts like an asynchronous future. And then there's some stuff about closing it down. And effectively, then you can write something that validates the greeting to replace what you were doing before, where your future does a get with a 100 millisecond timeout. So effectively, you have this listen to see if the change comes in. You call your RPC, it comes back. You say, get me the result, and I'll wait up to 100 milliseconds for it to come back. And if in fact it came back correctly as being done in that time, then you've actually got what you're looking for. Does that make sense yet to folks? There's a fair bit of asynchronousness going on. Yes? Uh-huh.
So it says to do this, use it and validate greeting registry.
Uh-huh.
What about validating RPC response? I mean, we're calling program response just before we call validate RPC response. Isn't there a race condition there also?
Let's talk about that. So jumping ahead. So you call the RPC response, and you're saying basically before we know the RPC is necessarily returned, we're going to check and see if this eventually returns?
We're calling program response. So
But program response, yes, but program response actually does something very specific. Program response at the very end of it has a future.getChecked. So it's going to block, it blocks. And since it's part of a test method, that's really what we want it to do. But no, that's a very astute point. You could potentially give yourself similar problems there. So, you know, basically we produce this data change listener. We produce something that validates the greeting registry. And then you want to use it by basically creating this future before your validate RPC response, and then use the validate greeting registry, the new version of the method, to validate it. Does that make sense to folks? Okay, cool. All right, I've only got a few more minutes up. I apologize, I got double booked into something at the tail end of this. So I've only got a few more minutes before I have to depart, but Raghu can stay here and help you guys work through this. And then there's actually also, we probably aren't gonna have time to get to it, the reworking Hello World Impl customized greetings to be completely async, which is again, more of building futures for things. It's kind of interesting if you want to look through it and sort of see what's going on there. And apologies, we have not gotten to how the magic works. But are there any questions before I need to leave? Yes?
So with async, you know, these async change listeners,
Uh-huh.
let's say I'm interacting with this from some other application.
Yep.
What options do I have for pushing with some kind of a change event to that other application? So if I'm just interacting through like a REST-like API, is it fine with received event? Is there like an option for WebSockets?
Oh, you mean if you're doing it through REST? There's some WebSocket stuff, but I honestly haven't tried it in a very long time, so I'm not sure what its state is. For the rest, there is a WebSocket thing that's available, but I've never used it, quite honestly. So I don't know what its state is. But asynchronous is always kind of a pain with REST. There are like a million ways to fake it, but it's really unnatural. So, yes? Apologies. Of course, but it's hopefully an illustrative set of toys.
Can you think of some dimensions of how you could take these things further into something that might be more real, just picking some dimensions of what you've done?
So basically, what we've done is the basic set of skills that you'll want to work with, which is how do you build RPCs intelligently? How do you wire them up? How do you test them and integration test them? How do you write data to config an operational store, and how do you test that? How do you do data change listeners and figure out that this sort of stuff is going on? So these are all the basic building blocks you would use for many kinds of applications you would build in OpenDaylight. It really becomes a question of what messages do you need to send, which are RPCs, what state do you need to store, and is it operational or configurational? And who needs to know when it changes so they can take some other kind of action? Those are kind of the basic building block pieces. So, yes?
So one we didn't get to was
Was what? No, I apologize about that. It just wound up being so much material. Sure. I mean, I was thinking in terms of, frankly, DHCP, because I really want us to have a DHCP server, because there's a lot of interesting things you can do with that. But effectively, it winds up being much the same thing. You have a southbound plugin that's listening on some kind of a socket, or it's built on top of Netty. Information comes in, you transform that into either messages that are being sent to someone or to data that you're persisting. Someone either sends you a message via an RPC or writes data that you're listening to, and you translated that into something that goes onto the network protocol. So it's Tony was joking earlier, there really is no southbound here, it's all at the same dignity. And that's a lot true about building southbound plugins. Because I've had several people talk to me about, I have CLIs or I have REST. And in those cases, it's just data flows one way, you translate it. It flows the other way, you translate it. There's just a lot of that behavior that goes on in southbound plugins. Uh-huh.
some interesting things around reuse of data to different models.
Around what?
There's some interesting things around reuse of the adapters for different models.
Oh, yes, yes. So things like,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe we can catch you next week.
Absolutely, absolutely. Would love to. I would love to. Cool. Any other questions? Yes.
If you go back to the slides and
Mm-hmm.
the one about empty cell,
Mm-hmm.
did we cover everything?
Oh. I think there was some talking about a little bit of waving my hands rapidly at clustering. And there was some stuff about routed RPCs that we skipped past because we're not really doing stuff with routed RPCs here. And I think those are the things that we didn't actually get to in those slides. Ah, the ones that Raghu showed? These slides? These? Yep.
Are these in our working or USB?
No, but they're on the wiki page and in the introduction section. Yeah, we didn't actually get the notification broker. Yep, yep. So, okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. It's been really a pleasure. You guys did amazingly well. So, yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been fun. So, and I hope to see you guys the rest of the week here. There's a lot of other cool stuff going on.